I don't remember the last time I felt like a father. I stood by the catering station while my son raised his glass and declared himself the head of the family. Laughter erupted around him. I waited, plate in hand, for someone, anyone, to notice I was standing. No one did. When I walked toward the cake slowly, trying to smile, Daniel caught sight of me. His voice rang out louder than the music. "Old men don't need birthdays," he said. "They need retirement homes." The room froze, then burst into laughter. I froze too. My hand trembled slightly as I stepped back from the table. A few guests gave me awkward glances, but most just looked away. I nodded gently and returned to my seat, if you could call the folding chair by the catering table a seat. Not a single soul followed. The waiter came back around then. Young man, slim build, soft eyes. He quietly placed a slice of cake on a clean plate and set it in front of me. "I noticed you didn't get one," he said. "Happy birthday, sir." He didn't smile out of pity. He said it like I mattered. I looked at the slice for a long moment. Chocolate with strawberry filling. My late wife used to bake me that every year. Daniel never remembered that. But this stranger, he had more dignity in his small act than my entire family combined. "Thank you," I whispered, barely holding the edge of my breath. He simply nodded and walked back to his station. I stared out across the room. My grandchildren huddled around their phones. My daughter-in-law clinked her glass to someone else's, lips coated in laughter. The decorations, the music, the elaborate table settings, every inch of it was paid for by me. And yet, I was the outsider in my own celebration. If anyone's listening, don't make the mistake I did. Don't confuse providing for being valued. Don't confuse silence with respect. A few feet away, Daniel posed for pictures with the cake. He cut it without even glancing my way. I heard him tell someone he's fine. He likes to sit alone anyway. I used to believe that birthdays were a time for family, a moment to feel remembered. But standing there in the corner, I realized I had become a fixture. Like an old chandelier no one wanted to replace, but no one looked at either. As I stood to leave, I caught the waiter looking at me again. This time, he gave a small nod, one of those silent gestures men give each other when words would only embarrass them. I nodded back. I stepped out into the cool night air alone. I left before the final toast. No one stopped me. No one noticed. I slipped out the side door and found myself on the patio, the kind usually used for wedding photo ops, twinkle lights, white iron chairs, ivy growing up fake trellises. The night air was still, almost too still. My jacket clung to me, not from the cold but from the weight of being completely invisible. A few minutes passed before I heard soft footsteps behind me. I didn't bother turning. "I thought you might want this," said a voice. It was him, the same waiter. Malik, I'd later learn. He held a fresh slice of cake, same as before, but this time he sat down beside me. Not hovering, not waiting for a tip, just sitting. "You didn't get to enjoy much of the party," he said gently. I gave a hollow laugh. Didn't seem like my party to begin with. He stayed quiet, just listened. That silence did more than words ever could. After a few minutes, I broke it. "You always this kind to strangers?" He looked down for a moment, then replied, "My mom says you can tell everything about a man by how he treats the ones who serve him. Your son failed that test tonight." I felt a knot tighten in my throat. "You noticed that, huh?" I muttered. Malik nodded. "It's hard not to when a man's being humiliated in a room he paid for." His words cut through me, clean and honest. No pity, just truth. It burned, but it also cleared a fog I hadn't realized had been building for years. We sat there longer than we should have, him still in uniform, me still in my silence. "You from around here?" I asked. "Queens, working part-time, finishing my degree, trying to help my mom through nursing school. She's had a rough time since my dad passed." Something about that landed hard. A boy carrying his family on his back, while my own son couldn't lift his voice to say, "Happy birthday." "Do you need a ride?" I asked. "You sure?" I nodded. "You've already done more for me tonight than anyone else." We drove in silence for a while. The city lights passed like ghosts. He hummed softly under his breath, some old jazz tune I couldn't place, but it reminded me of nights with my wife, long before money and legacy corrupted our lives. He thanked me when I dropped him off, said he hoped I had a good birthday. I waited until he walked inside before I spoke to the empty car. "It was better than last year," I said. Driving back, I didn't feel like a broken man anymore. Just older, wiser, and maybe for the first time in a long while, ready to stop forgiving what the wind was sharp that morning. I remember because my knees ached the way they do before a storm. I'd taken my usual walk, 3 miles around the neighborhood, just enough to feel useful, just enough to feel alive. But when I turned onto my street, something felt wrong. There was a white envelope taped to the front door. A thin piece of paper fluttered against the glass, and the locks had changed. I walked up slowly, gripping the railing like it might vanish under my hands. I reached into my pocket for my key, knowing somehow that it wouldn't fit. I tried anyway. It didn't budge. The letter was folded neatly, official seal at the top. My name printed in capital letters like I was a case file. Notice of legal guardianship enforcement. Temporary possession transferred. Client, Daniel Martin. Alleged incapacity, cognitive decline, memory loss, unfit for independent residence. I read it twice before I noticed the forged signature at the bottom. My name written in Daniel's hand. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The paper shook. My own son had declared me mentally unfit. I pressed my hand against the doorframe, like touching the house would somehow unlock it. I built this place with my bare hands in 1976. I still remembered mixing the concrete for the steps, laying the brick in summer heat while my wife brought me lemonade. And now I couldn't cross the threshold. I called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I texted, "What is this? What have you done?" No response. I sat down on the top step, the legal notice still in my lap. Neighbors passed by. A few nodded. None stopped. Eventually, the sun dropped behind the trees and the cold settled into my spine. I made my way to the car. My old Corolla. Still ran because I took care of it, unlike the people I once called family. I opened the driver's door and just sat there, the leather cold against my back. I stared at the porch light flicking on, triggered by a timer I'd installed. Like everything else in that house, it still ran because I built it right. At some point I leaned the seat back and closed my eyes. There was nowhere else to go, no one else to call. The bank app said my accounts were frozen. Power of attorney, that's what they called it. Daniel called it for your safety. But safety shouldn't feel like exile. I stared up at the ceiling of my car until the streetlight outside turned off at dawn. The house stayed dark, so did everything inside me. Helen hadn't changed much. A few more lines around her eyes, a slower gait maybe, but the same steel in her spine I remembered from decades ago. She was one of the few people who still called me by my full name. "Richard," she said as she opened the door, "you look thinner. Sit down, tell me everything." I didn't know where to start. I handed her the envelope first, the copy of the guardianship notice, the forged signature. I watched her eyes scan the page, watched her expression tighten. "This isn't your writing," she said plainly. "No," I replied, "but it's my name and that's my house." She sat back, jaw tight. "And he claimed cognitive decline. Daniel never struck me as subtle, but this." I took a shaky breath. "He froze my accounts. I had to sleep in my car." Helen didn't blink. "You came to the right person." I'd forgotten she once managed our family trust. My wife and I had sat in her office 25 years ago, laying out our legacy for our children. back when trust still meant something. She turned to her desk, flipped through a drawer, pulled out a worn red folder marked Martin Family Trust. Dust clung to the edges. "These files haven't been updated in years," she muttered. "But if he filed anything new, it should be in the system." She reached for her laptop, fingers flying with practiced precision. Minutes passed in silence. "Then he made changes 6 weeks ago." I sat up straighter. "What kind of changes?" "He removed you as trustee, gave himself full authority, had it notarized using power of attorney, which, by the way, is a completely separate process. But the documents are filed, and they've been accepted." She turned the screen toward me. I saw my name, listed as beneficiary with no management authority. I felt like someone had reached through the screen and hollowed me out. "How?" I whispered. "How can he just take everything?" Helen looked at me carefully. "Because people assume old men don't know what's happening, and your silence was the permission he needed." I nodded slowly, shame curled in my chest. She wasn't wrong. But Helen leaned forward. "That said, if you're mentally sound, and I know you are, we can challenge this. We need to be careful. Quiet at first, collect everything, prove his intent, his deceit. Then we hit him where he thinks he's strongest, legally, publicly, undeniably." My voice came out thin. "Why would you help me after all these years?" She smiled gently. "Because I remember you. You were kind. And because no one deserves to be erased from their own life." She stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "This isn't about anger, Richard. This is about restoring your dignity." Then she added, "And when we're done, he'll never mistake silence for weakness again." I waited for him outside the coffee shop. It wasn't a fancy place, just a small brick storefront tucked between a laundromat and a deli. The kind of spot where no one's in a rush to leave. It suited me fine. Malik showed up 10 minutes early, just like I had. He was still in his campus hoodie, a backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mr. Martin," he greeted, smiling warmly. "You didn't have to reach out. I was surprised." I shook his hand. "Call me Richard, and I did have to. You were the only person who looked me in the eye that night." We sat by the window. He ordered tea. I got black coffee, no cream. We talked, really talked. His father had died in a car accident when he was 11. His mother worked night shifts as a nurse. Malik picked up dishwashing jobs when he was 14. He studied at night, worked at dawn, and somehow got himself into law school on a partial scholarship. "I'm in my second year," he said, sipping his tea. "It's rough, but it matters. I want to help people who get taken advantage of. I see it every day." I listened, and the more he spoke, the more I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. "I remember you brought me that cake," I said, my voice a little lower. "Not because you had to, because you saw me." He looked down for a second. "I saw how your son spoke to you. It didn't sit right, not just because it was cruel, but because it was public. He wanted everyone to see it." I nodded. "He took my house, my accounts, my name." He didn't flinch. "That's theft, Richard, but dressed in legal language. That's the worst kind." I stirred my coffee, eyes fixed on the swirling black. "What if I gave it all to someone else?" I asked. He blinked. "You mean your estate?" "I mean everything, the house, the trust, the future. What if someone like you inherited it instead?" He laughed softly, unsure. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," I said. "You've never once looked at me with pity." That night I called Helen. "Can I remove him from the trust?" I asked. "Can I give it to someone who deserves it?" There was a pause. "If you're of sound mind, and we document every step, and we can show his misconduct, yes." I stood in my dark apartment, phone still pressed to my ear. "What would that look like?" I asked. She answered clearly. "It would look like justice, quiet, legal, unmistakable." I looked out the window. The street below was empty, but for the first time since Daniel locked me out, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. It started with a list: names, dates, transactions. Helen laid it all out on her dining table, the same one we'd used to sign the original trust papers decades ago. Now it was cluttered with folders, coffee cups, yellow legal pads. My name appeared on every page, but always as a shadow, reduced, overwritten, reassigned. "He used your signature on 3 amendments," she said, tapping a file. "But the pen pressure stroke different. A handwriting analyst could confirm it in seconds." I nodded slowly. "He probably never thought I'd look." "Because he never thought you'd fight," she replied. We spent days gathering proof. Voice messages from Daniel's calls, one where he laughed about streamlining things now that Dad's too tired to care. Text messages sent to my broker, unauthorized transfers. Transactions showing payments to a luxury renovation firm, while I slept in a $40 motel. "Is it enough?" I asked. "It's more than enough," Helen said. "This isn't just a betrayal, it's theft cloaked in authority." She began drafting the new estate plan. I watched her type my wishes with precision, revoke Daniel's authority, reinstate myself as sole trustee, assign succession not to blood but to character. I spent that evening alone at my apartment, writing a letter by hand. "To whomever reads this after I'm gone. If this feels unusual, it's because it is. I did not leave behind wealth in the traditional sense. I left behind the last decision I was free to make. I chose someone who remembered what respect looks like, long after my own family forgot." The pen trembled halfway through. I stopped, gathered myself, and continued. "Kindness shown when there's nothing to gain, that's the purest kind. I hope this decision inspires more of it." The next morning, I invited Malik to meet me at Helen's office. He looked nervous when he walked in. He thought something was wrong. "Sit down," I said gently. "This won't take long." Helen slid the folder toward me. I opened it, read the clauses aloud, then turned to Malik. "I want you to accept this. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to finish law school, enough to build something, and enough to carry my name forward in a way I can be proud of." His hand shook as he set down his coffee. "Why me?" I looked him in the eye. "Because kindness to the forgotten is worth more than bloodline, and because you saw me when my own son didn't." He covered his face, took a long breath, then nodded slowly, gratefully. Helen notarized the documents with a firm stamp. The ink hadn't even dried when I felt it, that quiet, anchoring calm. Not vengeance, not victory. Just dignity returned. My birthday came again, quiet this time. No balloons, no grand venue, no son standing at the center of a crowd pretending I didn't exist. Daniel didn't call, no message, no card. What he did send, via his lawyer, was a legal notice. A petition requesting expanded control over my pension. He claimed I was still in cognitive decline and that I was socializing with individuals who may be manipulating me. I read it twice, folded it, and tucked it under the leg of a wobbly table in my apartment. That was the last it deserved. Instead, I got dressed in the one suit that still fit me well, navy blue, pressed the night before. Helen met me at the restaurant first, holding a small gift bag and a tired smile. "Still breathing?" she asked. "Barely," I said, and we both laughed. Malik arrived soon after, carrying a bouquet of fresh lilies and a gift he couldn't afford, a leather-bound notebook. "For your next letter," he said, "or maybe your memoir." We were joined by 2 old friends from my factory days, men with sun-dried faces and stories older than Daniel's sense of entitlement. The restaurant was modest, a family-owned spot with handwritten menus and candlelight on every table. No music, just the clinking of glasses, warm greetings, shared bread. There was laughter, full-bellied, unfiltered laughter. When the cake came out, chocolate with strawberry filling, I didn't cry, but I felt something shift inside me, like a door creaked open after years of being jammed shut. Helen took a photo on her phone. Just me and the cake, hands resting gently on the table, a smile soft enough to belong to someone who had reclaimed his name. She asked if I wanted her to post it. No captions, I said. Let the silence speak. Hours later, I uploaded it myself. One photo, no tag, no explanation, just a timestamp and a man who looked like he remembered who he was. By midnight, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Daniel's voice sharp, slurred with bitterness. You're making a damn fool of yourself with that waiter, posting pictures like some charity case. You think anyone respects you for this? You're embarrassing the family. I swear, if you keep pushing this, don't come crying when the lawyers hit back. I saved it. Didn't respond. Didn't need to. The best replies are the ones written in ink and witnessed in courtrooms, not shouted into voicemail. I stepped outside into the cool night air, the scent of lilies still lingering on my sleeves. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt free. The courtroom smelled like paper and old wood, familiar but not comforting. I sat straight in my chair, palms flat on the table, as Helen organized our files beside me. She didn't say much. Neither did I. We didn't need to. Daniel walked in flanked by his attorneys, dressed in a sharp suit I probably paid for. He didn't look at me until he sat across the aisle. When he finally did, it wasn't guilt in his eyes. It was amusement, like this was all beneath him. He leaned back and whispered something to his lawyer, then smirked at me. Helen whispered, "Let him smile, he won't for long." The hearing began. Helen laid it out clearly: forged documents, financial abuse, misuse of power of attorney, psychological manipulation. She moved through each charge with precision. Then she clicked to the voicemail recording. Daniel's voice filled the courtroom, loud, angry. You're making a damn fool of yourself with that waiter, posting pictures like some charity case. Don't come crying when the lawyers hit back. The room stiffened. The judge leaned forward. Helen didn't flinch. That was sent on the defendant's father's birthday, after a public photo posted from a legal, private gathering. She turned to me. "Would you like to speak, Richard?" I nodded and stood. My knees shook slightly, but my voice didn't. "I may be 75, I said, "but I know when I'm being silenced. My son didn't just take my house or my money. He tried to erase who I was. He made me feel like I didn't exist. And when I dared to smile again, he threatened me for it." Then Malik was called. He adjusted his tie, stepped forward, and spoke with calm clarity. "I met Mr. Martin during an event where his own family ignored him. I witnessed his mental clarity, his awareness, his kindness. I watched his son mock him in public." He glanced toward Daniel. "I'm a second-year law student. I've read about elder abuse. This was it." Daniel's attorney scrambled to object, but the judge had already heard enough. Helen placed one final file on the desk. "Your Honor, this is a handwriting analysis. It confirms the power of attorney updates were forged." Silence fell. The judge's voice was measured but final. "Power of attorney is hereby revoked. All financial and legal control is to return to Mr. Richard Martin. This court recognizes clear evidence of fraud and elder abuse. Further action may be pursued." Then came the gavel. That sound, solid, echoing, landed deeper in my chest than I expected. I looked at Daniel. His face was drained of color, lips slightly parted, eyes searching for something to hold on to. But there was nothing left to claim. The courtroom emptied slowly, but I stayed seated. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel cruel. It felt like I had finally been heard. I hadn't sat at that desk in over a year. The oak was scratched and faded now, but it still smelled like the letters I used to write my wife when she was alive. I ran my fingers over the grooves worn smooth by decades of bills, birthday cards, and plans meant for a future I thought I understood. That morning I spread out everything on the surface. Photos from before the bitterness, before Daniel stopped calling me dad and started referring to me in third person. A family vacation at Lake George. He was maybe 12, clinging to my shoulders in the water. Another, his graduation, me holding the camera while he stood next to his mother, beaming. They felt like someone else's memories. I played an old voicemail from my wife, her voice still warm, still knowing. Don't let the world convince you you're smaller than you are. I placed the recording beside the photos. I pulled out the napkin Malik had written on after that first coffee. He scribbled a thank you note I hadn't expected. I hope I age as gracefully as you, sir. No one had ever said that to me, not even Daniel. I folded it neatly and slipped it into the folder. Then came the pen. I signed the revised will, my hand steady. I signed the letter that would accompany it. And finally I signed the trust, official, notarized, witnessed. Daniel Martin, removed. Malik Said, appointed successor trustee. Not out of guilt, not out of sentiment, but because he had something money couldn't fake, integrity. I paused after the last signature, staring at the ink as it dried. So much of my life had been spent believing blood was the only bond that mattered. But blood doesn't keep you warm when you're locked out of your own home. Blood doesn't hand you cake and dignity on the same plate. Character does. I packed the documents in a fireproof envelope, labeled it to be opened upon my passing, sealed it, placed it in the safe. Then I returned to my desk and wrote one more note, handwritten, unfiltered. Daniel, I hope one day you understand that legacy isn't about money. It's about who you become when no one is watching. You watched me fade and you clapped. Malik saw me standing in the shadows and offered me a seat. That is why this is his now. Not because he's perfect, but because he remembered I existed. I folded that one too. No one will see it until I'm gone, but that's all right. Some truths don't need an audience, they just need a signature. The phone rang just after sunrise. I let it go to voicemail at first. I don't know why, maybe out of habit. I don't expect birthday calls anymore. But then I saw the name. Malik. I played the message, his voice crackling with joy. Richard, I passed the bar. I'm being sworn in this afternoon at City Hall. I want you there, please. It'd mean everything to me. I sat there in my kitchen, coffee cooling in my hands, and let the moment settle. A year ago, I was sleeping in my car, stripped of my name, my home, my place in the world. Today, a young man I barely knew back then was asking me to sit front row for the moment that would define his future. I put on my best blazer, the same one I wore to court when Helen and I faced Daniel. The fabric still smelled faintly of that day, something like courage and old paper. City Hall was packed, families, friends, mentors, all gathered in quiet pride. I took a seat near the front, unsure if I belonged among the fathers, mothers, professors. But when Malik walked in, he found me immediately. His eyes lit up. He gave me the smallest nod. That was all I needed. The judge called names one by one. Applause followed each, and then Malik Said. He rose, walked with a quiet confidence, took the oath with his hand steady and voice clear. Then came the moment for acknowledgments. Most thanked parents, some thanked professors. Malik looked out over the crowd and looked at me. I want to thank the man who taught me what dignity looks like, he said, voice steady. Even when stripped of everything, even when forgotten, he carried himself like someone who still mattered, because he did, and still does. He paused. Thank you, Mr. Martin. I didn't cry, not there, but something cracked gently inside me, not from pain, from healing. That night I sat alone again, but it felt different. There was no restaurant, no guests, just a small cupcake from the corner bakery and a single candle flickering in the dim light of my kitchen. I lit it, watched the flame dance. And I whispered, "Happy birthday." I thought about Daniel wherever he was, maybe still bitter, maybe still blind. He gave me betrayal, but unknowingly he gave me peace. Because in losing him, I gained something better. A legacy not built on inheritance or blood, but on grace. I blew out the candle and let the silence wrap around me, not heavy this time, but warm. I was alone, but I wasn't forgotten.